Well, welcome into another episode of the Dealing the Cards weekly Q&A episode where we answer your questions that you submitted on Twitter, YouTube, in our Discord, and all the other places to talk about Cardinals topics that we may not address in a typical episode or that you want us to go a little bit deeper on. So today's topics will range from, again, rebuild, retool, what is the offseason plan for the Cardinals, specifically with certain players like an Andre Pallante or a Paul Goldschmidt, what are their roles going forward, and what is the Cardinals' role in responsibility and potential pitfalls within player development and why certain prospects haven't panned out over all others. We'll cover all this and more on this Q&A episode of Dealing the Cards. Hey, well, thanks for joining us again. We've really appreciated the support on these. And again, as we're going through the episode, comment questions below for next week. You can tag us on Twitter as well. We'd love to answer your questions and hop on in here. I don't have specific names to the questions today. I apologize for that. I'm recording after the third game of the Brewers series. The Cardinals pulled out the series. And I'll give a brief thought on it real quick. It honestly doesn't really change my opinion of the team right now. Unfortunately, I'd love to say that I think they're back and they're fixed, but I just think they're gonna have to prove a lot more to me than beating the Brewers 2 of 3 one time. I do think one thing that's really encouraging though for Cardinal fans is Nolan Arenado over the month of April. So this is 73 at bats. I don't know how many plate appearances exactly, but he's slashing 315, 367, 507. It's a 874 OPS, 3 home runs this month, 15 RBIs. Obviously, he had that walk-off grand slam last night, clutch hit today. I mean, Nolan Arenado looks better. He's, I think, 7 outs above average this month too, which is really, really good for him as well. I mean, that's really great defense at third base. So you like what you're seeing on Arenado right now. I mean, if he can continue to play like this the rest of the way, it gives the Cardinals a little bit of hope. More so for me, it maybe gives some hope toward what could he look like in 2025 or what's his appeal as a trade candidate, if that's kind of where you're leaning. But yeah, overall, I mean, the Cardinals just have 3 games. They're behind 3 teams in the NL wild card race right now. I still think they're 6 games behind the third place team of the Braves. I think I saw the other day where if the Braves went 500 the rest of the way, the Cardinals have to go like 24-12 the rest of the way to surpass them, and that's without the Mets and the Giants playing better too. I don't know. It seems like a tough stretch to me at this point. The pitching has kind of fallen off a little bit. The rest of the offense isn't really hitting. But I mean, if they can keep playing like this for multiple weeks in a row, it can change it. But I'm not there. So if you thought I was going to come on today and be super optimistic, I'm not. It's fun to see good baseball though. So I'm interested in that for sure. But let's jump into the questions today. So the first question came in the form of this. In your opinion, is a partial rebuild or a full scale rebuild a better option for the Cardinals? I think this is an interesting question. I think it depends on what your definition of a partial rebuild is and what your definition of a full rebuild is. And then within those, how much do you trust the Cardinals' current young core and their prospects that are coming up? I personally don't think you need to do a full scale rebuild because, in my mind, again, this is definition of full scale rebuild for me. Yours might be different, but a full scale rebuild is you basically tear it to the studs, you trade away everyone, and you're kind of trying to you're at least looking 4 years ahead, if not 5, 6, right? Like it takes a couple years of a tear down and a couple of years of a rebuild back up, and then you're back in contention. I mean, it's been a down year for pretty much all of their young players at the big league level, not named Mason Wynn and Alec Burleson, but I still like a young core of Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson, Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar. Our expectations from each of those guys might need to shift and change, right? Like coming into the season, I didn't know what Mason Wynn would be, and obviously I think he's a bright star in this league. I don't know if superstar is in his future, but top 12 shortstop in baseball at some point, easily top 10 shortstop. I think so. Yeah. Like he could be a really good player in this league, maybe even more. Alec Burleson, again, I think he's someone you could trust to play first base for you next year, the corner outfields. Jordan Walker is still really high on. I know it's been a disappointing year, but I think he's got a lot of potential. Brendan Donovan, I think he's a real leader in the clubhouse. I think that's really important. The versatility is great. Down year offensively, but he's still pretty good. Above league average, we expect more. Nolan Gorman and Lars Nootbaar where it's a little odd for me. I have more confidence in Nootbaar than I do Gorman right now, but I'm not giving up on Gorman either, honestly. So for me, I look at the young core, and that's what I need 5. So Burleson, Wynn, Nootbaar, Donovan, and Gorman. That's 5 young players right there. You add Wilson Contreras into that mix. You probably have Nolan Arenado too still at that point. That's 7. You've got Ivan Herrera, like Victor Scott. I mean, I feel like there's guys there. Now, are they lacking some star power? For sure. I'm not trying to say they've got all the guys they need. What I'm saying is if you tear back some of the other things, you've got a core to work with. It doesn't the core doesn't have to be the stars of your team. I'm saying you've got maybe a couple of the pillars, but you definitely have a lot of ancillary pieces that are on arbitration or pre-arbitration numbers. You've got some pitching coming up too. Now, also, I think when people say, "Hey, let's pencil in the rotation in 2026 to have Tin Kens, Quinn Matthews, Cooper Jerpy, and so, like you're getting a little aggressive there because even for organizations that have 5, 6, 7, 8 top pitching prospects, a lot of times multiple of those guys don't pan out. So I love a lot of those guys, right? Especially Matthews, Henson, Jerpy, but I'm not. I think it's too risky in this game to put in pen that one of those guys is gonna be even a middle of the rotation starter, let alone a frontline starter. So, but do I think one or two of those guys could work out along with like the trajectory of this change can team can change if a Quinn Matthews or Tink Hence is like a number 3, number 2 type and someone else, whether it's one of those guys or a Graceffo or McGreevy or someone is a number 4 or 5 type because you're not spending $18 million a year on a Miles Michaelis or $13 million a year on a Lance Lynn to fill those roles. You've got a guy making less than $1 million a year on those roles who might be even more effective, allows you to spend money elsewhere, do some other things. Again, assuming there's some leadership changes, I think you've got a if it's like Chaim Bloom, someone that I kind of trust to target the right players and maximize talent instead of wasting money. We talk all the time about the Cardinals. They need to spend more money, but in all honesty, they just need to spend money better first and then also spend some more money. So I tend to be more partial rebuild. So I call it more of a retool, but I'll call it partial rebuild here, where 2025 is maybe a step back, but I don't think it's a step back as in you're losing 100 games. I think it's they might honestly have about the same record as they will this year, but the trajectory feels so much different because instead of it feeling like a team that's patching holes and trying to make it work with a lot of veterans and trying to scrape and claw into the playoffs to get back there. Instead, it's a young, bright team where it's like, hey, anything they do this year is gravy. Really, it's about development. It's about seeing who is the guys you're going to build around and what are the areas you need to add to. And as Jordan Walker steps into his own, as Nolan Gorman or Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar, or Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson step into their own. As a JJ Weatherholt starts to come up in a few years, then what are the ancillary pieces or other star pieces you need to bring in to surround those guys? That's kind of where I think the direction of the organization should go. But also, it kind of depends on how systemic you think these issues are and how quickly they can change. Like, can new leadership overhaul player development in a year or 2 years? I don't know for sure, but if they can, I don't think this is a super long rebuild. It also depends, like, ah, how confident are you that I think I'm confident that they can get back into contention at NL Central as soon as next year if they wanted to. I mean, go look at the Kansas City Royals. You don't have a Bobby Witt Jr., so that's a trump card they have, but they had an excellent offseason where you brought in a Seth Lugo and a Michael Waka and others that have really helped that team propel from a terrible team to a team that's going to make the playoffs. And the Cardinals are not as bad as the Royals were last year. So you take this squad and have an offseason like the Royals did, you can get into a similar spot as them and they're a contender. So again, I don't think you need to go full scale rebuild. But I don't blame people who think that could be a direction you go, especially if you don't trust the young core. But I think this young core could be a part of the next winning part of Cardinals baseball. I just think it's in. I don't know who all thinks if any of these guys could be stars and lead the team. I think they at least have a lot of ancillary pieces or borderline, like not like if you're looking at like the Phillies, maybe you have guys that can fill the Cal Schwarber role or the J-Tail Remuto role or the Nick Castellanos role or the Bryson Stott role. But do you have an Alec Bohm? Do you have a Bryce Harper? Do you have a Trey Turner on your team? That's where it gets really questionable long term. Pitching side, again, you may have, well, Ranger Suarez isn't a great example because he's been great this year, but you might have a really good number 3. You might have a good number 2, but do you have Zach Wheeler, right? Like, I think these are questions that are really fair about the trajectory of this club. But yes, I think it's more of a partial rebuild, 1 to 2 year turnaround. I don't think you need to tear it to the studs. Let's go into it's a similar question that leads into this because in a lot of ways, where the Cardinals are at now is a reflection of issues that they've had currently, but it's also the compounding effect of issues over the years. And one of the main things is player development not panning out how they thought it would be. So the question is, at what point do you consider or typically consider a prospect to be a bust? Also, given how many of our prospects are failing to click in St. Louis, do you think we're suffering from a bad batch of prospects, or is it more of a reflection of the Cardinals and that they just can't get the best out of their own players? It's hard to put a blanket statement on something like this because not every player is the same. Expectations shouldn't be the same of every player. And I think some players do fail because they were misused and mistreated. Mistreated, not maybe sometimes mistreated in the way you might think that may mean, but like misdeveloped, mishandled. But other times it is a player just didn't reach their potential and it was kind of on them. So I would say though it is more reflection on a deterioration of player development within the St. Louis Cardinals organization. Case in point, you look at the early 2010s and the way that they're pumping out pitching like no other. They're pumping out young bats like no other. And maybe not the rate they are right now, but like you have a Matt Carpenter come up, right? I don't know, I'm blanking on their names right now. Matt Adams was a guy that helped out the team, Colt Wong. There were names that you could do, and then they were able to go make the smart veteran savvy moves like a Carlos Beltran, Lance Berkman, all that kind of stuff. Alan Craig, that was a name I'm forgetting here. So they've had that era where they could do stuff like that. But lately, it's like, well, the bats come up and they're actually more exciting as prospects than they are guys producing. Not helpful, right? The arms is nowhere near the days when you had Shelby Miller, Carlos Martinez, Michael Waka coming up, and then later on you had Alex Reyes, Jack Flaherty, obviously sent away Sandy Alcantara and Zach Gallen, but you haven't really had one of those names in a while, right? You haven't really had a number 5 starter that often. So I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I don't think the Cardinals have had the strongest of top end prospects in a while. Like, maybe a Dylan Carlson could have become a star here, but I don't know. Maybe his ceiling is a little bit less. I think Jordan Walker is the guy who could become a star, like a legit superstar, star type guy here. So far, it's not working though. But again, how much of that is the Cardinals' development of him? Which of course I will say there's been a lot of mishandling of him lately. Case in point, bringing him up for 10 days to be a platoon bat and sending him back down, super weird. But like, how much of it is Walker? Like, it just some of this stuff's hard to say. But I would say, in general, the first part of this question, when would I consider a prospect a bust? It depends on expectations, right? I'm not quick to say within a year or two unless they're just so bad. Like Jordan Walker, I guess maybe I can't give you specifics, but I can give you types of players. Like Dylan Carlson, as soon as last year, I probably would have said was a bust. Jordan Walker, I'm not ready to say is a bust yet. Nolan Gorman, I'm not ready to say is a bust yet. Nolan Gorman's trending more toward a disappointing prospect than Jordan Walker is. But again, like, you've seen sustained success from Nolan Gorman at the MLB level. You've seen sustained success from Jordan Walker. And when he came up in June last year to the rest of the year, he was 20% above league average. That's no joke from a guy who was one of the youngest players in all of baseball. Nolan Gorman last year, besides the month of June, I think it was the month of August, was 30% above league average or better in every other month. Like, he was playing like an all-star. Like, I just think if you've already seen guys perform like that, Lars Nootbaar, who's seen perform for extended stretches, but then he's also not like a top prospect. So is he a bust now that he's not performing, or did he already outperform expectations? You could probably argue the fact that he's given you the quality he has over the last few years. You never expected even that from Lars Nootbaar. So is he a bust? Is Brendan Donovan a bust because he's regressed a little bit offensively, or is he a really good player or a really good outcome because, again, you didn't think Brendan Donovan would be anything more than a bench bat, but he's been a key regular? All this is definition, so it's kind of hard to say on some of that. I think it's a really good question though, and it's one that people could debate back and forth for a while. But yeah, it's kind of hard to give an exact there for sure. But before we keep going, I want to thank one of the sponsors of our podcast, and it's 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles. 314 is located at 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet. They're open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday and 9 to 4 on Saturdays. If you're interested in trading cards, 314 buying cards, selling cards, trading sports cards with them, Pokemon cards as well, 314 Sports Cards does it all. They have the newest selections of packs, boxes, and you can get single cards of local players and stars around the league as well. I definitely recommend following them on Instagram because you can find all the different stuff they have on there in terms of different individual player cards or box sets that they're currently featuring. Same with Pokemon cards and stuff like that. So if you're interested in buying, selling, trading sports cards and collectibles, definitely check out 314 Sports Cards and let them know we sent you. Now, I want to keep going with this with another really interesting question. And this is maybe a more success story of the Cardinals player development recently. The question was, will Andre Pallante be in the Cardinals rotation next season? Let me just throw a couple stats at you here before I kind of give my answer. So, since Andre Pallante has entered the Cardinals rotation, it was on May 29th, I believe. He has a 3.75 ERA and 3.75 FIP. He's thrown 69 and two-thirds innings. He started about 13 games. That is the best ERA and FIP on the Cardinals since he's entered the rotation. He's the only guy at the sub 4 ERA. Since 2022, Plante's made 23 starts covering 124 innings with a 3.85 ERA and 3.87 FIP. I personally think you pencil in Andre Pallante into your 2025 rotation at this point for a multitude of reasons and a multitude of directions you could go. First of all, expectations of Andre Pallante should not be anything more than a back end of the rotation starter. The Cardinals come into spring training and they're like, Andre Pallante is our number 3 or number 2. And I don't think they would do that. But if they did, I'm not advocating for that. But is Andre Pallante a quality number 5 option for you at this point? I think yes. You have over 20 starts at the big league level of sample size at this point. Again, is that an insane sample size? No. But we're also talking about a Cardinals organization that doesn't have a ton of options right now. So you kind of got to go with your best options here. Here's what you here. So even if let's go retool first or rebuild, you're not like you'd rather see what you have from Andre Pallante than signing or bringing back Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson on club options, right? Like if you're bringing those guys back because you think you could trade them later, that's one thing. But like I don't know about that. I think you kind of go with Andre Pallante and Michael McGreevy types and Gordon Graceffo types and all those guys that you can get something out of the rest of the year and see like can they contribute long term as back of the rotation starters or even more than that. So I think in that scenario, Andre Pallante is for sure in your rotation. I think of a team that is trying to contend in 2025. Do you want a rotation next year, which you very well could? Like they could go this direction of Sonny Gray, Eric Fetty, Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, and Miles Michaelis and Steven Matz. Like, is that the 6-man group you want? I don't think so. I think at this point, so sorry, I had to sneeze there. I think at this point, you kind of pencil in the fact that you're going to decline Lance Lynn's option. So it goes down. So then you're going Gray, Fetty, Michaelis, Gibson, and Matz as part of your 5-man with Pallante as your 6. Okay, you could do that. Or do you raise the potential of your rotation, right, by trading Steven Matz, by also declining Cal Gibson's option? Now your 4-man group consists of Gray, Fetty, Michaelis, and Pallante. Okay, Michaelis and Pallante are back to rotation starters. Eric Fetty is your 3. Oh, you got rid of Gibson, Lynn, and Matz. That's like $30 million. Now, give or take, because you might eat some of Matz's contract, but could you go at Nathan Eovaldi in the low 20 millions? Could you go after Max Fried in the mid to upper 20 millions? Could you, I don't know, go after Max Scherzer as your number 2? Like, again, I'm not necessarily saying those specific guys, but I would much rather have Andre Pallante as my number 5 and go after a true number 2 starter if the payroll constraints don't allow you to have like other insurance as well, than to bring back more veteran arms as insurance at this point. Like, go big if you're going to try and go for it this time. I got pitcher injuries happen, so you have to have more starters than 5 that you trust. So like that's also why if they're especially the sooner they realize they're out of the race, the better, because you need to see what you have Michael McGreevy. You need to see what you have in Gordon Graceffo. You need to see what you have in Adam Kaufenstein. This offseason, you need to let Matthew Liberatore, you need to make a decision. Is he a bullpen arm or are you going to let him try for the rotation again? The more you can kind of define who these guys are, and if you have, like, say you do trust Michael McGreevy to make 10 starts for you next year if he needs to, or Graceffo to make 12 starts for you if you need him to, that changes things. And then Pallante doesn't need to be your backup option. You could be your 5. So, yes, I think Pallante is in the rotation next year, no matter what direction they go with those. Next question here. We got 2 more left for this episode. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, if this is your first time, like the stream or this video, helps the channel a ton. Subscribe if this is your first time here. Comment below questions that you have as well. A, helps the algorithm, so it's helpful for us. But B, we want to know questions you want answered for next time as well. And I also want to take a moment real quick to thank another sponsor of this podcast, which is SeatGeek. If you use the code NewtNews, you can get $20 off a purchase, your first purchase on SeatGeek of tickets. And it doesn't have to be a Cardinal game. It can be a concert. You can go to a Bears game and watch them Caleb Williams. I'm so hyped for that. St. Louis FC, again, the St. Louis Blues season starting soon. They've made some really nice moves this offseason. Do you any of those kind of games, use our code NewtNews, or again, concerts, NewtNews, and you can get $20 off your first purchase of $50 or more. So you can go in on tickets with someone and save money, get better tickets for yourself, maybe splurge a little bit here because you're getting some savings. Just make sure to use the code NewtNews next time you make a purchase on SeatGeek. So next question, I think it's a really interesting one. If Chaim Bloom takes or decides to overhaul the organization, or again, if anyone decides to overhaul the organization next year, will fans have patience for a multi-year rebuild? They specify 2 to 3 years to rebuild. It's a great question. I think it comes to a couple different things. Like, if 2 to 3 year rebuild involves next year like tearing it to the studs, and you're not even watching Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, Lars Nootbaar types anymore. You're watching Matt Kaperniak, maybe Walker's still there, Pages, Jose Fermin, like you're really tearing it down. No, I don't think Cardinal fans would have patience for that. Because because that's not a 2 to 3 year rebuild. That's long term rebuild. I do kind of think fans would be okay and go to the ballpark if they kind of knew they're a couple of years away, if there's a direction, right? Because there's something different about right now. If you don't believe in this Cardinal team, which some people do, some people don't. I don't currently believe in it. I did believe in it. Now I don't. If you don't believe in the team right now, it kind of feels a little directionless, and it kind of feels like you're just trying to make things work so you can win high 80s games or win high 80s games again and make the playoffs and figure things out and just kind of keep patching it. Like, that's hard to support. But if you're supporting the organization, you're like, hey, they've got some interesting prospects coming up. They got an interesting young core. They're sitting on some money that they're going to spend the next 2 off seasons, or some big trades they want to make because they're trying to figure out what is the next right move. What do we have before we go out and splurge? You've got JJ Weatherholt coming up, right? You've got Tink Hence, Quinn Matthews, Thomas JC. Like, that could be really interesting to people. And there's a fun element. I think Cardinal fans could embrace it, of watching a young club go through the highs and lows of a season where it's like, man, there's some tough stretches in there where they just don't look very good. But instead of demoting and promoting guys because it's like, oh, Jordan Walker's struggling, send him down because we need to win right now. Instead, it's like, okay, Jordan Walker's struggling, but he's the everyday right fielder. He's going to be the everyday right fielder. And then it's like, man, April was tough. Oh, man, May was tough. Okay, June. Oh, whoa, end of June, Jordan Walker's popping off. Oh, man, July, Jordan Walker's really good. Oh, the rest of the season, oh, he's going to be a star. Like, Cardinal fans could get really excited, I think, about watching a young team kind of develop together and then adding those outside pieces to it and seeing more guys. So it's like you see this young core. Oh, now JJ Weatherholt's a part of it. He just got promoted. Oh, Tank Hence is there. Like, oh, they have a top pick next year again. Like, I think that kind of stuff could excite them, but I don't think that excitement could last more than 2 years max. Like, I think by year 3, you need to start seeing them contend, get back into it. I do not think they can muster or stomach a 4 or 5 year rebuild, because most 4 or 5 year rebuilds, fans don't go to those ballparks. Again, most of them don't have the fan support of the Cardinals anyways, usually. But yeah, also, I mean, what's the ownership positioning of it? Like, are they positioning it as like, man, we've been bad last few years and fans haven't given us money, so we're going to scale it back and we're not going to spend as much, and this is why we're bad? Like, fans are not going to like that. But if it's a, hey, we realize that we've fallen behind the times, we realize that we've messed up for some years, so the only thing we can do is change our ways going forward, which requires us taking a little bit of a step back so we can get back to where we need to be. And if fans see that it's working, again, I think fans could go ballpark. People might disagree with me. Please let me know down below. Like, if there's a direction, if there's a clear vision to you as the fan of what the future is about, hey, 2025 and 2026 might not be as good for us, but because of that, 2027 and through 2031 are going to be our years. Like, would you potentially go to the ballpark and tune in the games to watch a young team like that, or do you tune that out? Let us know down below. Okay, one final question for today. I think is really interesting. What is the future for the Cardinals at first base? Will they bring back Goldie for veteran leadership? Okay, I'm recording this after the game on Thursday. You'll see this on Friday. I kind of think you started to see the seeds of what the future is at first base today, where Paul Goldschmidt's not playing against a right-handed pitcher. You see Alec Burleson at first base. Team Team's playing a little better without Goldie in the lineup here today. Well, they scored 10 runs yesterday, so that's not totally fair. But I have more confidence with the Goldie out of the lineup right now, especially against right-handed pitching. Against left-handed pitching, Goldschmidt's actually been really good this year. Again, running scoring position is a whole different deal, but he's still quality platoon bat. But he can't start against right-handed pitching every day now, right? I think you're going to start. I'm hopeful, and I think you should start seeing down the stretch. I don't know if he's going to stop playing against right-handed pitching, but I think you're going to see Goldie start getting less and less starts with Alec Burleson playing first base. They can have a different outfield outlook at that point, especially if Nolan Gorman comes back at some point, because I could see him back in September call-ups, or Jordan Walker comes back. But yeah, I think what you're seeing is the future where I think they want to see, do they trust Burley at first base? I think he's just an outside shot. Luke and Baker can become that, but I don't know if they trust him there. I do think there's a potential for Luke and Baker to be the right-handed side of a first base platoon with Alec Burleson. I think long-term you want to see Alec Burleson become the guy there, but right now he just can't hit against left-handed pitching, so you might need to platoon him there. There was a question in this, and there's always a question about first base. Is Jordan Walker there? No, I do not see the Cardinals moving Jordan Walker to first base anytime soon. Again, we just went through Jordan Walker having to relearn a position, and he's actually, like, even John Mozeliak just said it himself the other day, and he's been pretty harsh and critique, like fair to, like, strong critiques of Jordan Walker. He said, hey, this offseason we told Jordan Walker to work his defense. He's now an average outfielder or better. And I'm like, yeah, Jordan Walker is now an average outfielder or better. And that's more valuable than someone playing first base. So yes, Jordan Walker is going to be your right fielder moving forward. In the future, could he be a first baseman, a third baseman? Maybe. But no, not right now. I don't see that. So I kind of get why people ask it, but I just think it's everyone around the, like, media around the team, the Cardinals themselves, like, no one's saying that's going to happen. So it's just not going to happen. And then the question, like, could they bring back Goldie for veteran leadership? I mean, it sounds like they're going to explore it, but should they? I don't really think so. And I don't think Goldie wants to be a part-time player, but maybe he does. Maybe that's how badly he wants to stay in St. Louis. So appreciate the questions this time. Again, we'll do this again next week. I think you'll probably see Sandy instead next time, but really appreciate all the questions that come through. Make sure to check out 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles. And SeatGeek, our code Newt News. Again, it's the old podcast name. Gets you $20 off a purchase of $50 or more. We really appreciate you all and hope that, we want to see some better baseball. Even if I'm not anticipating it, it'd be fun to watch it. We'll be live again on Sunday as we always are. So really appreciate all your support. Like and subscribe. Helps the channel a ton. And we'll see you guys next time.